We have two huge games on the docket. First, the Knicks, after losing Game 5 in shocking fashion, bounce back in a hard-fought Game 6. Brunson once again puts up a masterclass. Josh Hart hits a clutch 3, and New York advances to the second round. And then, the Los Angeles Clippers, after a heroic performance from both PG and Harden in Game 4, had a decidedly unheroic performance, all while Luka Doncic had his best game of the series, resulting in the Mavericks getting a dominant win in LA. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Two quick notes, new podcast of the Shoot Around is out. We did a super team, failed super team tier list, as well as talked about the playoffs further in depth with some different perspectives because there's 3 of us instead of it being just me. And then last, I have a question for you guys. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Would you like this show as an audio experience, as a podcast on separate platforms, on like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff like that? Because we've been thinking about exporting just the voice, the vocals of it, and not having the background music, because I know some of you prefer not to have the background music, and a lot of you have commented that you watch these videos or you listen to these videos instead of actually watching them, which I think makes sense. This commentary is more or less just a fancy podcast, not even that fancy. But yeah, let me know what you think of that idea. But moving on. All right, let's get into Knicks versus Sixers. The first quarter made it seem like this game was going to get really ugly really fast for Philadelphia. The game started 16-4 New York. Donte DiVincenzo decided to hit his three-pointers in this game, and he started this game with 3 of them in the first quarter, including an absolute bomb at the 5-minute mark. This is something that I was watching out for because of a take my friend Alex had on our podcast.
Donte DiVincenzo, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, because I ran out of money to gamble, I would go find a loan shark right now and just like ask them for the maximum amount of money possible to just throw down a fat wad of cash on Donte DiVincenzo making like 5 threes tonight.
The Knicks dominated on the offensive glass in this quarter, getting 9 offensive rebounds, but Philly started to come alive to end the quarter, as Cameron Payne stole the ball from Josh Hart and hit a pull-up 3, which shifted the momentum rather dramatically on a whim. And it was a 14-point game at the end of the quarter instead of the 22-point lead that New York was at one point. Buddy Hield got in early in the second quarter, which was a nice surprise. I honestly did not think he would see the floor again in this series, but he did, and it's fair to say that he made the most of it. I think he just needed to see the ball go in, but Nick Nurse was also like rightfully pulling him, because if it's not going to go in, then he's a massive liability and you only have so long for you to let him figure it out. But he hit his first one, which I think is the reason why he would hit his next 4 in this quarter. He hit a 3 at the top of the key as the D got lost on the double screens from the bigs. Buddy took advantage of their confusion, and he would hit back-to-back 3s later in the quarter, one of them off of a swing pass from Tobias Harris after Embiid in the post got the D in rotation. Enjoy that one if you're a Tobias Harris fan, or Tobias Harris, because that's the last compliment that I'm going to be giving him. And I feel like a Tobias Harris fan and Tobias Harris are both equally likely to watch this video. Buddy's 5 three-pointers, as you can imagine, completely shifted the momentum now in Philadelphia's favor. Would have been nice if you did this a little bit earlier, Buddy, but it's nice to see that it at least eventually happened. Some of us do take a little while to finish. New York, meanwhile, was cold the whole second, scoring just 15 points, so Philly was up 3 going into the half off of this wild shot out of the corner from Buddy. Not too bad after a 33-11 start. The third quarter felt the most like a back and forth between these two teams' stars, probably for the whole series. Embiid had 16 and Brunson had 11. Embiid got this really tough post move on Hartenstein, and by tough I mean good, not difficult. And he hit a pair of 3s, including this ridiculous step back. I don't know what it is about the playoffs that made Embiid think he's Steph Curry, but he's just been launching that thing. OG would get a corner 3 off of a Josh Hart offensive board at the end of the third, so we are tied going into the fourth quarter. Once again, Josh Hart gets an offensive rebound, and once again, OG gets an open 3 out of it to open the fourth. I don't know if it was Batum or Paul Reed, but someone here fucked up on this play as they would both chase Brunson and they overcommitted when no one got in between the rim and the roller, so Mitchell got an easy dunk. This play was foreshadowing for the end, by the way. Brunson started to heat up as we got closer and closer to crunch time. It felt like the more pressure was on, the more likely he was to make the shot. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Embiid, who had a pretty rough quarter. Jalen would hit back-to-back threes midway through the quarter, a tough pull-up three as Embiid was afraid to step up too far from the paint, and a catch-and-shoot on the break. He would also hit this insane mid-range shot. Once again, Embiid doesn't really step up, but it's still two defenders, so crazy that he made it to beat the shot clock. OG got a dunk that was so filthy that it actually scared me. I'm not kidding. When this dunk happened, my genuine reaction was I clutched my pearls. I was scared. The dunk scared me. I wasn't ready for it. Kelly Oubre hit a big corner three, and then Maxey had a wild finish on the break where he hit the layup as he was falling down, which was similar to the very tough layup Brunson hit in Game 3. That made it a 3-point game. Oubre got a putback dunk after Tobias Harris missed one of the 2 shots that he took in 30 minutes. That made it a 1-point game, and at this point, I thought Philly was going to hold on and actually manage to pull this one off. Embiid was having a rough quarter, but the role players were stepping up to fill that gap. But they could really only do that on offense, and on defense, I think him being slower and tired and probably still injured to some degree really showed itself. Dude just wasn't putting his hands up on a lot of shots. For example, here after Jalen puts him in jail, all he does is like lightly swat at the ball like that would do anything. Dude, you're like a foot taller. You are literally a foot taller. You can do a little bit more than that, I think. That said, Philly was still in it, and they managed to tie the game because Isaiah Hartenstein goaltended and fouled Maxey at the same time. Impressive. So it's a tied game. Keep composure. Don't make any unnecessary mistakes. And they left Josh Hart wide open for 3. Yeah, remember how they overcommitted on Brunson and that resulted in a wide open dunk? Same thing happened here, but for 3. Very tough way to lose.
You don't have any criticisms about the last shot from the Sixers? It's very rushed to me.
There wasn't much time.
There's 3.5 seconds left, and the buzzer went off when the ball hit the ground.
Try to get into a shot for a 3.
Batum to toss it in, floats it, Hield throws it up, it's off!
Yeah. Look at this frame. Look, he had a great game. I'm not going to do it to him, but Jesus. Yeah, honestly, though, I blame that on the set. Yeah, that play was fucking Nick Nurse's fault, and I have some criticisms for Nick Nurse, but we'll get to that. My key notes for the New York Knicks. This team is single-handedly changing how I feel about offensive rebounds. Now, don't get me wrong, I realized how valuable they were before, but this series has shown me that it's a bigger deal than I thought it was. Rebounding in general, I think, has become less and less important in the NBA as offenses are getting better. It just means more shots. Also, I think having a rebounding big is less important because longer shots means longer rebounds, which is why it's better to have wings who are good rebounders. Not better, but also nice. And obviously, with Josh Hart getting 14 and OG getting 9, they rebound pretty freaking well. Josh Hart, holy shit, this guy is a coach's dream and then some. I think we should reevaluate where this guy ranks in the league because, like, he's kind of not that far, definitely not quite, but not that far off from like Derek White territory where it's like, look, I understand this guy's not the greatest scorer in the world, but his impact on the game is ridiculous. He had 6 offensive boards out of his 14, and I'm willing to bet that out of those 7 assists, at least 4 of them was just him kicking the ball out to the 3-point line after getting the offensive board. Invaluable. Can't even express how important he was for them in this series and this game. I think the key to their rebounding is that their guards don't really get back initially, which, like, you're like, the guards outside the 3-point line, what difference does that really make? A couple of times in this game, there were tap outs where, you know, there was a struggle for the board inside the paint. Someone smacked the ball out of the 3-point line, outside of the 3-point line, and, you know, one of the guards corralled it. That ended up happening twice with Donte DiVincenzo, and they got extra possessions and extra offense out of it. And they managed, you risk giving up fast breaks, not getting back on defense fast enough by doing that, but I do think that this team is disciplined enough and seasoned enough in this specific skill to recognize when they should or should not do this. Hartenstein and Mitchell combined for 11 offensive boards, and I want to say Mitchell Robinson had 6 of them in 17 minutes. That's crazy. He also had some really good moments defensively against Joel Embiid. Embiid really felt his physicality. Side note, I didn't realize how fucking big Mitchell Robinson was until I was looking at him for a second next to Embiid, and I was like, I think they're the same size. I think they're both 7'1", like 270, 280. Like, Mitchell is bigger than I thought he was. And I've watched this series, so I've seen him, but Jesus. Anyways, I didn't really ponder it until just now, but he had a really good post possession where he just denied Embiid post entry. Like, he completely denied him getting good positioning, and Embiid got frustrated and ended up pushing him, and that resulted in an offensive foul and a turnover. So coaxed him into that. Also had a possession where he forced him to pass out. The Sixers did end up scoring, but Embiid didn't, and that was his job to stop that matchup. Wasn't his job to stop Nick Batum in the corner. Yeah, let me talk about the minutes. The minutes are nuts, but I also feel like they're conditioned for it. Like, Josh Hart in the last 36 games of the year played 40 minutes a game, which is fucking crazy. That was partially due to injury because there were some Knicks players hurt, but I also do think that this was somewhat strategic in getting these players prepared for the conditioning of the playoff environment. Now, in the playoffs, you're not necessarily going to play 48 minutes per game as Donte DiVincenzo did in this one, but you're going to play like 40 plus if you're a good starter. So you need that stamina. You need to be used to that. You need to be able to handle that. And, it's probably not the safest logic because there's an argument to be made. You can also just make them save their energy and use it later. How much that translates to long-term energy versus short-term, who's to say? Someone who's not me, for sure. But yeah, I think it was preparation. Like I said, in the case of Donte DiVincenzo, all 48 minutes of this one he played, did not sit down. Definitely his best game of the series by far. And honestly, I think that his shooting offset Buddy Hield's, because I think he hit 5 and Hield hit 6. And like, if he had another game where he just couldn't hit for 3, they really don't have a volume 3-point shooter to match that, like a guy who's a true, more or less catch and shoot guy. So yeah, Donte gave them that opportunity to match. The rotations in general just told me that Tibbs did not want to go to a game 7 in here, and I think he even made a comment like that. I also have to praise Tibbs, which can't say that I expected to do that. I used to be a bit of a Tibbs hater, but what can I say? He's gotten me, he's proved me wrong. I thought that his ideology was outdated, and I think for a time period it was, but he eventually came around and managed to create the perfect blend of old school and new school. Like, he still has the old stuff of like the defensive identity, the offensive rebounding in general being very pivotal. I recognize all of this from when he was coaching the Chicago Bulls, but he doesn't have very dumb offensive decisions being made anymore, like starting Keith Bogans over Kyle Korver, for example. He recognizes that offense is important and recognizes modern offensive principles enough. It's a modern offense, and it's like an old school 90s make you feel them defense. And that is a beautiful combination, and it's making the Knicks one of the most fun teams in the league to watch. Honestly, I think Tibbs is just recreating the 2011 Bulls with Brunson as his Derrick Rose, OG as his Luol Deng. I don't know if Hartenstein quite qualifies as Joakim Noah, but the metaphor's in there somewhere. Obviously, Jalen was amazing. I don't even really feel the need to mention it anymore because it's so obvious. I had to stop writing down every time he hit a cool shot because he kept fucking doing it throughout this series after the first 2 games. Yeah, 41 and 13. As good as the scoring was, I think it was the playmaking that ultimately won them this game because, at the start of this series, the reason his first 2 games were bad is they were putting a lot more pressure on him, but of course other Knicks players were eating from that. obviously Josh Hart getting the 4 3-pointers in each of those games. That was leading them to like, okay, we'll see if we can survive single coverage with a wing on him. It was either Batum or Tobias or Kelly. Assume that wing can do a decent enough job on the one-on-one coverage. They really couldn't, and Brunson cooked the preceding games. And he kept cooking until they were like, okay, we're putting a stop to this. We're going to start throwing 2 to the ball during the fourth quarter. They went back to the strategy that was not winning them games because it was leading to open shots for guys like Josh Hart. And then, of course, that's exactly what fucking happened. They were just overcommitting on the doubles. They were kind of constantly putting him on edge to like make a decision. Like, you have to make a pass here. Not all the time. They didn't make it difficult all the times, but more or less, he used his offensive capability and offensive gravity, misdirected the defense, and then got his team a ton of good open looks. And that's perfect offense. And that's exactly why scoring gravity and playmaking are inherently connected. And if you don't have one, your other is worse. So, Jalen Brunson, strong playmaker, even stronger scorer, and that strong scoring made him a great playmaker today. I really love this Knicks team. This team's really good. I haven't liked a Knicks team like this in a decade. I loved the 2013 Knicks, but this team's probably my second favorite Knicks team of all time. Moving on to my key notes for the Philadelphia 76ers. All right, I'm going to start with the positives because it's a relatively short list. Nicholas Batum and Buddy Hield were awesome in this one. It was a questionable shot from Hield at the end of this game for sure, but I also feel like it was a very questionable play call. So, you know, who do you blame? Depends on who you ask. But the 5 threes in the second quarter is the whole reason that they were even in this game to begin with, the whole reason it wasn't a blowout. Batum, he scored 16 points, hit 3 3-pointers, got a putback dunk in the fourth quarter. He blocked Dante DiVincenzo floater. He was just all over the place in this one, and I'm shocked at how good he was in this series. Because of course, I believe he was the hero of, was it game 3 for Philadelphia? Either way, I thought this guy was pretty much done, or like, you know, a guy who could play 18, maybe 20 minutes per game in a playoff setting, but he became like, oh yeah, this guy can start. This guy is a solid enough starter. Obviously, there's better fifth guys out there for a lineup, but there's also much worse, and Batum was excellent. But now to get to the negatives. Cameron Payne hit 1 3 and decided that he was on fire and that he was just going to start launching, and I don't think he made another shot from there. In fact, let me just go ahead and confirm that. He went 2 for 8, so he got another one. I don't remember when that was, but he hit the first one and he was like, okay, I am Stephen Curry. I am going to launch a bunch more, and he ended up taking 6 in 15 minutes. Not good. Terrible, terrible thing, and he, ironically, from that 3, started momentum, and it was going in Philadelphia's favor, and then to open the second, he killed, it might not have been open, but in the second, he killed that momentum by shooting the ball and missing all the time. So he made the momentum and then he killed it. Tobias Harris fucking sucks, dude. He is terrible. He is very bad. I didn't realize how bad he was until recently. A lot of Sixers fans were giving me shit for thinking that he was still an okay starter. Fair enough. I was wrong in that department. This guy fucking sucks. Not really that positive of a defender. He's okay, but not a very good one. And definitely not good enough to be put in this game late over Buddy Hield. He shot the ball 2 times in almost 30 minutes and he's supposed to be their third option. What the fuck is that? He took 1 shot in the fourth quarter and that was it. That was all he had to contribute. Didn't do anything else in this entire fucking game. Threw a nice swing pass to Buddy Hield. Congratulations, but this was definitely his last game as a Philadelphia 76er, and I feel as though it perfectly encapsulates his tenure here because it was a waste of everybody's time. The fact that he played was a waste of time. I'm seeing a lot of doomerism for the Philadelphia 76ers right now, but I truly don't understand where that's coming from because this team is not in a bad position. Obviously, it's yet another year where they disappointed in the playoffs. I don't think that their future is necessarily in jeopardy for that. I think Tyrese Maxey is only going to get better next year. Embiid is clearly better. I'm going to talk about him in a second, but better at dealing with playoff pressure. I think they're fine, and specifically, they're fine because Tobias Harris will be gone, and the money that has made it impossible to put a lot of even remotely high-paid players on this team, that contract is gone now. and they can operate with that. They have some money to play with in free agency. They can put good role players around this duo of Maxey and Embiid, and I think they can go pretty far in 2025. I still have to talk about some more negatives. Nick Nurse made some really weird decisions in this one. As I mentioned, he put Tobias Harris in the game late when they were trailing, and Buddy was having a good game. Didn't really have a good game outside of that one quarter, but still, definitely was playing better than Tobias was. Even then, there's probably a couple of other options I would prefer. He ended up going with the lineup of Maxey, Hield, Batum, and Kelly alongside Embiid, and I think that's the best, that's the most optimal lineup. Also, Kyle Lowry played 12 minutes in this one. I didn't even mention that. I almost forgot he played in this game to begin with, because he's just old. That's what happens. He put Paul Reed in at the start of the fourth quarter. He decided to have Embiid play the entire third, but only 8 minutes of the fourth, and I feel like I would definitely flip that. Paul Reed was a -4 in those 3 minutes that he played, and given that you lost by 3, that does swing the game. Obviously, you can claim that that swing would have happened if you put him in the game earlier, but regardless, not good timing. I understand that Embiid was gassed, but you should have taken that into account and had him play the fourth with energy abundant and not just had him burn it all in the third quarter. Yeah, Embiid playing 8 minutes in this quarter doesn't make sense to me. This is a game where you're down 3-2. This is an elimination game. You're at home. Play your fucking players. Quite an opposite approach from Tom Thibodeau there. Embiid getting a lot of slander, rightfully. I do want to point out Tyrese Maxey did have a shit game. It was going to be a masterclass of a shit game until he did at least do what everyone will always focus on, which is he had a good fourth quarter. I think the way that people discuss the game and go like just talking about how it ended as though that's the whole thing, I think that's a little reductive. And Maxey being bad throughout the game is the reason why it was so close. You know, if he had a better start to begin with, maybe they wouldn't even had to be in crunch time to begin with. He obviously was the whole reason they even were playing this game, though. He had 47, I think it was, hit those 2 crazy threes, so I'm not going to knock him too much, but let's not sit here and act like Embiid's teammates showed up when his first and second option combined for 17 points on like 30% shooting. All 17 of those being Maxey's, of course. But let's get to Joel. Let's have the actual criticism portion, because there's definitely some stuff that's noteworthy here. I think it's pretty clear he wasn't 100% for most of this series, and honestly, I think his health had a peak in the middle of it when he had that 50-point game, and then it went right back down. As the series went along, as he got more tired, more gassed, had more minutes being put on his body, it slowly started to dissipate, and by the fourth quarter of this game, that guy looked like he was dying out there. He was not having a good time. That guy was exhausted. And I almost felt bad for him, because I've been there. Not in an NBA game, but you know, tired. I think I've done that before. In general, I don't think that his offense suffers as much as his defense does when he's injured, which is, I think, something that's undersold. The offensive focus is so big because obviously Embiid puts up big numbers, but defensively, he was pretty bad in this fourth quarter because he was just not moving, wasn't putting his hand up. There were 3 different shots that Brunson scored in this game that Embiid could have contested much better and that could have altered the result. Pull up 3 on the left wing, just looks at him. He's too afraid to step outside of the paint, so he doesn't step up enough at the level of the screen to get to the shot. Then there's the floater where he has Kelly Oubre on his back. He was right there, just lightly swats at it. And then the one crazy shot that he hit, to be fair, there was a double contest on it, but he also could have contested it. That one's the one that I give the most amount of, leniency with, because he could have been too concerned about the rebound, which, given how much New York rebounds offensively, fair enough, I suppose, on that front. But at least those 2, and those were huge plays. A 6-point swing that I think Embiid could have prevented to some degree, at least. He did have 5 turnovers, though. However, none of them were in the fourth quarter. That's what I was concerned about, because I was like, oh shit, did they start bringing 2 to the ball and then suddenly everything that he learned, he unlearned? Because that's what I was afraid of. I was like, is he going to deal with this in the playoffs, or is it going to be a problem? Ultimately, I think Embiid did very well with the pressure of the playoffs, but he was just dead by the fourth quarter, and as a result, he scored 4 points in 12 minutes. 6 points in 8 minutes, taking just 4 shots. Not good. Some of those turnovers were stupid. One of them in a way that was Embiid's fault and one of them that wasn't. Embiid threw the ball out of bounds to Tobias Harris in the corner on a skip pass that was like way over his hands. The other one, he was signaling to Oubre to come to the ball, and then Oubre looked him in the eye, was like, yeah, I'm coming to the ball, and then he cut right as Embiid threw him the pass, which was very funny, but I don't think that turnover is really Embiid's fault. Overall, this is not what the narrative is going to be. This is not what people are going to say, but I think ultimately this was more a positive for Embiid than not, because he's been terrible in the postseason so many times, especially when facing good teams. And the thing is, Embiid has won playoff series, but they're always against bad teams, and he's lost playoff series where Philadelphia was favored. Philly was not favored in this series. Okay, I understand 6 points in the fourth is not the best look in the world, but it's also not a disaster class. And in general, this was not a disaster of a series for Embiid. He put up some of the best stats he's ever had in a playoff series. He increased his assists by 3 assists per game, all while only increasing his turnovers by 0.3. That's a pretty remarkable margin. I think a lot of what Nick Nurse taught him and the way that he implemented him in the offense is a much better version of Embiid, much better for the playoffs, and I think it will result in better results in the future. They just need him to be healthy for a season, and they need to have better role players because this team was thin, and for some reason Nick Nurse felt like playing these guys, even with that being the case. There's a 9-man rotation here for them, while the Knicks had a 7-man, and a 7-man rotation where Mitchell Robinson and Miles McBride played a combined 26 minutes. So almost all starters for him, whereas we got Cameron Payne going 2 for 8. Kyle Lowry probably shouldn't even be playing to begin with at all. He was a -9 in 13 minutes. Tobias Harris probably shouldn't have been playing at all, but then again, who do you play instead? Some questionable decisions from Nick Nurse, but I think ultimately with the cap space they have going into the offseason, Philly should feel good. I think we should feel good about the fact that Embiid at least held up his scoring decently while playing injured through a playoff series. But yeah, that's that. Rough season, definitely a disappointment for Philadelphia, but I think the people who are like hitting the blow up the team alarm, I think they're being a little ridiculous. Heading into this game, it's a tied series, and that means this is a huge one, as the winner of Game 5 after a tied series has historically had an 81% win percentage from that point. The first quarter was an even affair between these two teams. The Clippers looked to get Zubac going early with some dump-off passes and post touches. This guy's just so much better than I thought he was. But Dallas was also feeding their big man, as Lively got a pair of lobs, one from Kyrie and one from Luka. This was also a really big game from Derrick Jones Jr. and Maxi Kleber, as they were both hitting the threes that the Clippers were giving them out of the corners, and they were playing fantastic defense. Derrick also had this awesome play where he blocked a James Harden step back and he got a transition dunk out of it. Dallas ran Kleber alongside Derek Lively in this one, which they've done a little bit in this series, but they did it a ton in this game, and it just makes sense. It gives Kleber the opportunity to do the Paul George assignment while not sacrificing rim protection in the process. It's just a way more balanced approach. Both teams' stars had fairly quiet first halves, but it was decidedly worse for the Clippers. Harden and PG both combined for 6 points on 2 for 10 shooting. In particular with George, Dallas defended him super well, which resulted in every shot he took being pretty forced. It's just not ideal, and if that's going to continue, LA had no shot of winning this game. Spoiler alert, it continued. To open the second, Kleber hit a pair of threes from the corner, a spot he has become particularly comfortable in, especially as LA keeps allowing him to shoot. Hey guys, just so you know, Kleber is shooting 60% from 3, which is a playoff high right now after this game, so maybe get a hand up. Just a thought. Zubac was still great in this quarter, getting this and one on a baseline against Lively, but if Zubac was your go-to scorer, you're just not going to win the game, and it did not win them this quarter as Dallas outscored them by 9. And where it really felt like Dallas had just stolen all momentum is when Kyrie threw a half-court court lob to Gaffert on the break. What an absolutely sick play. In general, this was a very paint-heavy affair in the first half, as both teams were really struggling from three, but similar to how their stars performed, it was worse for the Clippers. Dallas would go 5 for 21, which is bad, but the Clippers went 3 for 15. Luckily for Dallas, in the first half, they proved to be the better paint team, and in the second half, they finally heated up from outside. In the third quarter, Derrick Jones Jr. would open by hitting his second corner three of the game. Kyrie was defending Harden a lot in this game, and he did a phenomenal job, including this steal he got from behind, and then after, a nice transition layup off of a hezzy for an and one. Luka had a fairly quiet first half, and by that I mean he had 15, 5, and 5, so you know, pretty mid for him. He would really come alive in the third quarter though, scoring 14 points on 5 for 8 shooting, hitting a ton of step-back mid-range shots, one over Zubats, and one particularly impressive tough fade on the baseline. One of the wilder sequences in this one is when Westbrook miraculously broke up a Luka and Kyrie 2v1 fast break, but Kai ultimately corralled the ball and found Jones, who was running down the lane for a dunk. Lively got a really tough finish over Zoo. In general, a huge Lively game with 12 points and 7 rebounds on 5 for 5 shooting. This quarter was pretty much all Dallas, as they would outscore them by 10, 33 to 23. It was still somewhat in reach for the Clippers though, and Paul George ended the quarter by hitting a pair of tough threes, but before we would move on to the fourth quarter, Josh Green would silence all of the momentum that those threes built them up by getting an and one three out of the corner, which completely shut down their momentum. Luka and Kyrie would hit a pair of tough threes to open the fourth quarter, and it became pretty clear to everyone that this game was over. Most evidenced by the fact that PJ Tucker and Bones Highland checked into this one. And for me, when the scrubs check in, I check out, so that's pretty much it for this game. All right, my key notes for the Los Angeles Clippers. Honestly, there's not a lot to say about them as much as you can criticize them. This is more or less just if your star players are going to get locked up, then you're going to lose the game. And in this case, sure, I do think that James Harden and Paul George are in an echelon of stars where you can't expect them to get shut down more often than not, but they're not like, you know, superstar tier players at this point in their careers. They used to be, but they're not anymore. So for that reason, it's a little bit easier to lock them down, and they managed to do it in this one, and they managed to do it particularly because of Kleba and Derrick Jones Jr. Their wings were just suffocating them the entire game, and even Kyrie had a lot of possessions that he ended up on Harden. I don't know if that was necessarily by design, but it did happen a lot, and he defended him super well. I still do think we should have a little bit higher expectations for these guys not getting shut down to this degree, though, so ultimately they are very deserving of criticism. Zubats did everything he could in this game, as he kind of has this entire series. He's been averaging 16 and 9, and up until this game, he really had no issue at all defending Luka. Luka did get him a couple of times in this one, where to this point in the first 4 games, I really only visually remember it happening once. I'm sure it happened more than once, but that's all I can recall. The perimeter D was pretty weak on Kyrie early, and it ended up resulting in Zubats having to help and just not being there on time, and it was not very good. That's why Gafford got some early lobs, because Kyrie just kept getting a free lane to the basket and Zubats had to rotate over, so you just throw it to the rim and that's 2 points. Russell Westbrook was also bad in this game. He went 2 for 11 from the field, and actually between him, Harden, and Paul George, they would go 8 for 36, which is an abysmal 22% from the field. Harden was going to the floater game a lot in this one, and it wasn't really working for him like it did in the last game. Yeah, I really don't know what to add besides for that. It's just that the Clippers played like shit. Keynotes for the Dallas Mavericks. I have a lot more to say about the Mavericks here, because not only do I think this is a big game for them in this series, I think this is a big game for them and this series in general for what they can do in the playoffs. Now, obviously, without Kawhi Leonard, this has been a disappointing matchup to some degree for that reason. season. We expected a healthy Clippers team versus a healthy Mavericks team, and only one side of that equation got it. No doubt that Kawhi Leonard would bring a lot of defensive attention and make life much easier for Paul George and James Harden. James had a masterclass in Game 1, and Harden and Paul George both had a masterclass in Game 4. Don't know that they can just keep banking on that, and from here on, it's just kind of going to be very evident who the better team is. Unless Kawhi Leonard can just come back and be Superman, not seeing it really. But we'll talk about that more in the end. There's really two main takeaways that I have from this game, and it is the lineups and Derrick Jones Jr. and Maxi Kleber and how they performed on both ends of the floor. As I said earlier, they were hitting their threes, but they have also been hitting their threes throughout this entire series. As I mentioned, Maxi shooting 60% from 3, which is ridiculous, doing so on 3 attempts a game, and Derrick is shooting 42% on 2.4 attempts. They also hit 7 of them today, Maxi hitting 5, Derrick hitting 2. It's not like a crazy volume for their averages in total, but they're getting the open shots, and when they are getting them, they are hitting them, and that is very, very, very important for how this team will survive in the playoffs. Because of course, Kyrie and Luka, you have the desire to bring 2 to the ball as much as you can. I believe Luka was literally the most blitzed player in the entire NBA this previous season, and he's historically always been treated that way. He can pick them apart with his passing, but if the pass is going to be going to a guy who's just going to brick the corner 3, that's a great defensive possession. You stopped Luka from cooking your guy one-on-one, but you allowed an open shot, but it was to someone who was a non-shooter. But these guys are proving that they are kind of shooters, or at least good enough to hit a wide open one. And if you're good enough to hit a wide open one, it's going to cause the defense to rotate to you more, to have to commit to you more, and that means you're going to have to give single coverage to Kyrie and Luka more often, and that's definitely another L in a way. I'm really glad that Jason Kidd recognized the mistake that he made in Game 4. In my personal opinion, Jason Kidd lost them that game when he took Dereck Lively off of the floor for the entire fourth quarter. Maxi Kleber at center did not work, and it really hadn't worked to this point. It's an interesting lineup. I understand why they tried it, but ultimately it's better for Maxi to be a perimeter defender because that is where his strength is. He's not nearly as much a rim protecting type of player. He's 6'10", so he has the size, but he's not that type of defender. He's had many times in his career, especially against the Clippers, where he was a defensive pest on the perimeter. So that's where you should have him. So by putting him and Lively in the game together, you're still keeping your rim protection, and you are getting a more maximalized, more useful version of Kleber. And again, if he's hitting his threes, you don't have to worry about the spacing implications of that lineup. I do understand the concern there, the logic being that like Maxi can hit threes, and you would run like, I don't know, whoever, Josh Green with that lineup late. I don't remember exactly what the late lineup was with Derrick at power forward and Kleber at center. I don't remember who the other guy was. Whatever. Either way, I'm very happy with this lineup in general. I think going forward, their starting lineup, or at least their closing lineup, should be what it was in this game, which is Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, Derrick Jones Jr., Maxi Kleber, and Dereck Lively. 2 unstoppable scorers, a generational playmaker, 2 defensively minded wings who are very strong defenders who also are hitting their open threes, at least at this point. In the case of Derrick, he also makes for a really great transition target because he's just a freak of an athlete. And then you have the rim protection, the rebounding, and the lob target, Lively. I think that's the perfectly balanced lineup. You have a lot of defense, you have a good amount of shooting, and you have a ton of one-on-one scoring and, rim gravity, which is nice. This goes far beyond this game, though. I think going forward into the playoffs, if Derrick and Kleber continue to shoot their threes well, I'm not expecting Kleber to hold up 60%, but if they can both hover, at least 37% or higher, ideally even higher than that, if they could both be in the 40s, that's great. I think that makes a world of difference for this team, like truly, fully unlocks them. Like, because my suggestion going into this series for the Clippers was like, hey, you're going to have to make those guys prove they can shoot, because otherwise you want to bring 2 defenders as much as you can. But they don't really have the ability to do that if they're just going to keep hitting those shots. So I don't really know what the Clippers do from there with that. So yeah, the playoff implications are huge here. I don't know if they can maintain this, but if they can, you might want to start taking Dallas even more seriously than a lot of us already are. This was the best Luka Doncic game of the series pretty easily. Wow, I haven't even talked about Luka to this point, really. But that's, goes to show how much the Derek and Kleba impact and the lineup impact really resonated with me, and I really think it was the story of this game. But Luka having a fantastic game also helped them quite significantly, where he's otherwise been pretty disappointing in this series. In the first 4 games, he had yet to shoot over 43% from the field, but he shot 53% from this one, 35 points, just a very good stat line across the board. Did he get a triple-double? I can't remember if he got the rebounds. No, he only had 7 rebounds, but he had 10 assists. His 3-ball still not going in. As a whole, after this game, he is shooting 26% on 11.5 attempts per game, which I don't need to tell you fucking sucks. He also was struggling to get to the rim in the first 4 games. He got to the rim with much more ease this one. A couple of and ones, a lot more layups, a couple on the break. Easier, higher percentage shots for him. But at the very least, in terms of his jumper, he did get the mid-range game cooking in this one. He hit quite a few of them, and that's something that he has developed. It wasn't something he really had early in his career. He was taking the step-back threes, but not necessarily making them out of the gate, and then getting to the rim pretty well. But his mid-game was so-so. I think it was between his 2nd and 3rd year. He just came into the year, and suddenly he was Chris Paul, Dirk Nowitzki, Kobe, KD from mid-range. Not quite in that tier, but very, 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 very good at it. And that's really huge and important in a playoff game. Also, especially given that he was struggling from outside and the paint, that leaves the mid-range. And of course, that is the worst option, but if you gotta cook one way or the other, if you gotta take what you can get, I suppose. So yeah, very good Luka game. Having that mid-range game really helped him in this one, and he's just a damn good player. I don't think you didn't know that, but still. For the play of the game, for me, it just has to be this half-court lob to Gafford from Kyrie Irving. That's the only play of the night that really got me out of my seat. Otherwise, this game wasn't that interesting. But yeah, crazy-ass play. Player of the game. While Kleba was great in this one, I'm not about to do an Andre Iguodala finals MVP type thing. Obviously, Luka was the player of the game. First time he's looked truly dominant in this series, which is weird because he's always dominated the Clippers and the playoffs. Is probably the worst playoff series of his career, which is a wild thing to say. But either way, damn good game. Before I end this one, I just want to speculate a little bit more as for if there's really anything that the Clippers can do from here. I mentioned earlier, if Kawhi Leonard came back and he was Superman, he was really, really, really good, he was fucking Kawhi, that would be great. Not gonna happen more likely than not. I don't know if he returns at all, and if he does, I would be very surprised if he didn't look at least a little bit hobbled. That would make the lives of Paul George and Harden a lot better, but yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen. As I mentioned, I thought leaving those guys open was going to be the key here, and I didn't think they would hit them to this degree. With the 81% win percentage in Game 5, after Game 5s rather, I just don't really think there's a shot for them, especially because Game 6 is in Dallas. I would be very surprised. I feel like the Mavericks have hit their stride. I feel like they figured out what they want to do with their defense and their offense and their lineups. Probably took them a little bit longer than it should have, which resulted in this game probably being extended longer than it should have. But I think they're going to go into round 2 firing. They're going to be ready and good. And I don't, what's their matchup likely going to be? I haven't looked at the playoff bracket in a second. Ooh, OKC. That is going to be fun. That's going to be fun. I look forward to that a lot. All right, let's see what happens there.